if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. The reason why I got into tourism, I always had this huge fascination with other people. I remember being a kid and getting this book called People and Places, and it just had tribes from Africa, Germans and Lederhoisens, and I just was so fascinated that there are other people besides this bubble that it's a job that you're really unhappy in. That's a really strong call to action to change something.
I find that what's something that's often misunderstood about failure in startups is the idea that if your company doesn't, become a unicorn or something, you failed.
That created what I thought was a failure at the time. But in hindsight, that was the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah. Hello, crew. Let's talk about the climb and not just the peak. I'm Loveth, and this is Fayl Tales. Today, we have Desmond John. Thanks for being here, Desmond.
Thank you so much for having me, Loveth.
Desmond's story starts in a place few startup journeys do. So as a backpacker and tour guide, showing people around Melbourne's laneways and bar scene. Over time, those tours evolved into something bigger, a way of connecting people through stories, experiences, and community. Today, through his community Vibe Guide Ventures, Desmond helps founders, investors, and innovators come through together to pitch nights, ecosystem tours, and events that blend tourism with entrepreneurship. What he calls vibes as a service sounds pretty cool to me, Desmond. Welcome. When you were running your tours through Melbourne's bars and streets, did you ever imagine yourself running startup events and building communities? And I'm keen to hear when that switch happened and what drew you to the startup scene.
Thanks so much for having me, and really good question. Thanks so much. The reason why I got into tourism, I always had this huge fascination with other people. I remember being a kid and getting this book called People and Places, and it just had tribes from Africa, Germans and Lederhoisens, and I just was so fascinated that there are other people besides this bubble that
In
was-
Australia, we forget
Yeah.
sometimes a little island.
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as I finished high school, I just did endless backpacking, and as a backpacker, you do tourist experiences wherever you go, and I just thought, I love Melbourne, grew up in Melbourne. Why can't we do that here? And then I came back and explored. There was a pretty good tourism industry here anyway, so started doing just walking tours around the city and always enjoyed that. Had a number of jobs in tourism. I used to manage a backpacker hostel in Richmond.
Oh, cool.
Used to manage a bus tour company, taking buses to the Great Ocean Road and back. So did that for a long time. I did have an actual job one day, so
An
I
actual job.
was trying to get a corporate job in tourism, and that didn't quite work out. So they offered me a job at the Chamber of Commerce,
Cool.
which just sounded really corporate-y.
What did you do there?
So that was probably my first job out of uni. It did take me a while to study and graduate. Took about 2.5 gap years, just constant taking time off to go traveling and come back, and I always wanted to finish it. So I was probably about 24 when I was looking for a corporate job in tourism. But yeah, it was just a super entry-level job just on the phones. Embarrassingly, it was called telephone account manager, which just sounds like and it was the most entry-level job you can do, but there was a huge amount of the word humble, like it was very humbling to do a lot of work that was very uncomfortable, a lot of outbound calls, a lot of sales, a lot
of rejections, I imagine.
calling business owners when they just don't want to chat to someone on the phone. But ended up doing 3 years there, and that's when COVID started. For those who don't have too much knowledge about Melbourne during COVID, Melburnians will love to remind everyone, interstate Australians, people overseas, you have no idea what this lockdown was like. It went for so long. But working at the Chamber during that time gave me a huge level of appreciation for small businesses, for the state's economy. Before this started, we were just talking about government investment into things, and this state being so in debt with COVID, it just made me think, how can I help businesses during that period? And so working there, did have to take some time off from tourism for obvious reasons when COVID started, but really enjoyed my time there. But when I was working in corporate with businesses, I would just attend any events I wanted to, any kind of random business events, but I would often go to these startup events, the earlier stage businesses that are doing pitch nights and things like that. And the energy in the room at those events was just next level. And I remember joining a meetup that my good friend Paz was running, and Paz runs a community called the Community Collective. And again, I was just I'm working at the Chamber in one of those calls, totally not relevant to that kind of group. But I just remember joining, and even though it was virtual, I just remember thinking, the energy in this room, all the people here, how can I get involved in that? So I always tried to find a job in startups, which I did eventually. I started working at a startup called Birchall. So
Okay.
they do something called equity crowdfunding. So I was
Oh,
working there doing capital raising for startups for a bit.
nice.
Then started working at a startup accelerator. So we helped Australian businesses expand into the Middle East. But I always wanted to work at, I always had this idea of what's the Chamber of Commerce for startups? And at the time, there was an org called Startup Victoria, and they were doing all these pitch nights. And got to really know the team and was just trying to get involved somehow, and eventually got offered a part-time role. And I thought, actually, that's perfect because then I can start doing other projects as well, maybe get back into tourism. So this is all post-COVID. So started that a couple of days a week, started doing some fractional work for other friends in the startup space
Hmm.
while being able to go outside. Because I do remember in a job I wasn't quite happy in, and this is a really interesting turning point for a lot of people that are doing a bit of soul searching. If there's a job that you're really unhappy in, that's a really strong call to action to change something. And whenever I'm lost in a directional career decision, I always go back to a book called The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I read it about once a year or listen to the audio about once a year. And there was this quote that just shouted out to me at the time. He said, you can either do what you want with your career and be brave and try new projects and try things that will fail, or you can live your life as a spectator through an office window. And I remember listening to that at a
Wow.
job I wasn't quite happy in and looking outside and just wishing I was outside again.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, do you remember I used to spend years just walking people around and, telling bad jokes and getting paid for it. What if I just did that once a week? That would bring so much energy back to me. So being able to work part-time encouraged me to start finding other projects to work on. So worked for a good friend who was running these startup awards called the Pause Awards. And then I started contracting for a client I'm still working with called Cremorne Digital Hub. And then I did start working fully independently about a year and a half ago. And there was one moment where this guy I was working for from the Pause Awards, there was a global entrepreneurship congress in Melbourne about 2 years ago. And he said, hey, why don't you take the delegates around? I said, oh, wow, not only that, I could do like a whole tour of the city through the lens of like the history of the startup space or the
Wow.
history of the economy in
Yeah.
Melbourne. And so
Because that doesn't really exist.
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
kind of like combining tourism and startups together, and like, why don't you do that together? So that was my first time trying that, and that just worked really well. But importantly, I think we're always just trying to find that purpose and that Ikigai, which you might be familiar with that concept of. And so I just thought, oh, cool, that's my Ikigai. And since then, I've been able to collaborate on a number of different projects for a lot of different clients, but it's really allowed me to start focusing on that a bit more. And a lot of delegations came up. So, a 2-week program that the Department of Foreign Trade might bring in, and I often get tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, can you take them around on the Thursday, take them into some offices? So, yeah, I suppose that kind of background of really not knowing what to do, but having the enthusiasm of like, I like this and I like this. Can I combine those two?
Yeah.
That's created a lot of career purpose, and ended up in a situation where I get to, combine those two and take people around. And now when there's a conference in town, I always try to pitch, hey, the FinTech conference is here. Can I take the delegates around and show them the FinTech ecosystem? So I was able to do that a few weeks ago. And
Nice. And I'm
yeah,
guessing they enjoyed it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always hard to communicate that to people, like
Of
communicate what
course.
the event is, because it is kind of quite niche. But yeah, those things have been working really well, but it just allows me to apply a lot of that experience and enthusiasms into something quite unique. And yeah, just do what you enjoy doing. That's
Yeah. It sounds like
yeah.
you're living the dream, matching what you enjoy, the Ikigai, what you like, your purpose. And that's really cool and so rare today as well. So congratulations.
Oh,
That's
thank you so
amazing.
much. Yeah.
With this being Fayl Tells, I'm really keen to get your perspective because you bring a very unique lens. I find that what's something that's often misunderstood about failure in startups is the idea that if your company doesn't, become a unicorn or something, you failed. But often that's not the case. The success in everything we do. So how would you personally define failure and in the context of startups and what you've seen and experienced?
Yeah, it's a really good question about failure, especially in business, because there's no successful business without any type of failure.
Correct.
And so, to your question about how to define failure, if I were to look up a definition, I'm sure it's just the something not working out.
Yeah.
That's probably just a broad, very basic definition of it. But it's said so many times, there's so many quotes about this around how failure is so necessary. It's almost just like a guiding tool that if something doesn't work out, then maybe that door's shut, but you really need to pivot and try it another direction. And so it's a very simple, I suppose, definition of what failure is, but I think what works out so well is when someone's able to take that as feedback and use that as a tool to take them on the right path. So just pivoting in the right direction and using that failure as a superpower. I think there's a lot of examples of that. Yeah.
Definitely. Have you personally witnessed any examples of founders pivoting?
Oh, all the time, and I always try to re-embrace that to them, because any big success story in startups or big tech, just if you think about it now, like Uber, we were talking about this the other night. Uber is what it is now, but initially it started out as a way of being able to track existing taxis, and so you've ordered a taxi, but where is it? Is it coming? Is it 5 or is it 20 minutes away? I'd love to know. So that's kind of what the original purpose was. And then it ended up just owning that whole ecosystem and taking that market share away from the taxi industry. And that's a big topic now, and very similar with Airbnb. Just the whole story about the blow-up mattress on the founder's trip to San Francisco. Like, why can't we do that everywhere? And there's spare rooms on the floor. And what's interesting about a lot of these stories is that you often see waves of innovation during a crisis. So a lot of these household names actually started during the global financial crisis. And that's when like the sharing economy kind of just naturally evolved. So with the Uber example, all these people have spare cars and spare rooms and spare seats. Like, could you monetize that? There's a spare room in your house. Could you monetize that? And it's Airbnb. And so with COVID, I think we've seen a similar crisis, but similar opportunities that come out of it.
Yes.
So much tech now has been focused on remote work, high performance, AI. I don't know how much AI will come up in these conversations with you, but that's on its own wave. And so often, very rarely, the initial idea that someone has is going to be manifested years in the future. But the roadblocks and the hurdles and the feedback that people run into, if the founder is able to take that on board, they can use that to create a new product or create a new solution that maybe they didn't quite think of. But the important part was starting.
Yes. Yeah. The starting thing is really scary sometimes. And you're very right. Research has shown that the greatest innovations come through crisis. And I'm really keen in, 5 years to look back at the amazing startups that have come through COVID, because I think we're still a bit too close to fully understand the full impact and the full innovation. But I'm keen to keep an eye on that. You've spoken a bit about community, and it sounds like that's something that's really big in what you do, creating community, fostering it. What role do you think community plays in helping founders recover from failure?
Recover from failure. Really good question. And community is a very broad word, and it does get used in startups a lot. And so probably a new job title that probably didn't exist 10 years ago was community manager. And that rolls out. A lot of companies are hiring community managers, and they're always very, very different. And so, a community manager at a co-working space often involves a lot of hospitality tasks. So facilities, reception. A community manager at a venture capital firm, that often might involve a lot of marketing, a lot of program management. But it's so important, not only for startups, for local councils, for schools, to have this element of community, because was it 8 billion people on the planet now? And then there's always reports of people feeling more isolated. There's always reports of new technology coming out, which is great, but maybe that makes people more isolated, technology. So creating the human element is so important in this day and age. And in startups, community is so important. So founders, for example, probably the first thing that comes to mind is one of their clients I run events for is the Startup Network, which was that organisation called Startup Victoria, just changed names. And one of the board members is Doug English, who founded Culture Amp. And for those who don't know, Culture Amp's now a $1 billion company, started in Melbourne, still headquartered in Melbourne.
Wow.
And he would always give these examples when we're running an event with the founders. He'll say, hey, look, I was in your shoes 15 years ago, I'd no group of peer support that I could come to for problems, for just venting. But he was involved in a few startup communities at its real early days when it wasn't really a common concept. And he'll always give these examples of the benefits of him being able to meet other founders, to meet investors, to meet mentors who could help him build what they're trying to build, and what became a huge success story, Culture Amp. And I know the products they have now and what's worked really well for them weren't the original ideas that they did have when they did start out. So it's so important for a founder to have community, and it's so important for not only for the startup ecosystem, but for any industry. So when I was at the Chamber of Commerce and I was going to all these different business events, any industry has communities there, and it might be the industry association. Agriculture, there's a huge amount of support around that, and there's a number of industry associations for the agriculture industry where farmers can go to for these types of things for support, and in a way they're all communities in a way. So
They are.
yeah, it's so important. And there's that African, I think it's an African proverb that I'm going to butcher this now. I'm trying to remember it. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah, that's
And I
beautiful.
think there's a lot of analogies in life, in nature as well.
Yeah.
Like you'll never see, rarely do animals kind of travel out on their own in the safari. They're often with the group. So
With the clan. And I think as founders, especially in the tech space, it's quite easy to just focus on building whatever you're building and solving the problem. And it can feel like a bit of a taxing imposition to go to an event and to meet people and to network. But as you've kind of said, it really has benefits beyond what you would imagine. You could probably solve some of the challenges you're experiencing by meeting someone, who has the right solutions. And from what I've seen and heard, it sounds like network and community is what really carries the most successful founders today. And you definitely can't achieve or go as far as you think, or as you probably could if you're just on your own in your lane with your computer at home.
yeah.
So I think that's a really good point.
It's a very used expression of your net worth. Your network is your net worth. That gets used a lot. And you can apply that to so many examples.
So many. So you run everything from pitch nights to startup tours. What's a behind the scenes moment that didn't go to plan, and what did that teach you?
Yeah, and there's so many things that don't go to plan. Like if I were just to speak on a minor, suppose like a minor example, like anything from, and you'd know this from doing podcasts, like tech, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Microphone's not working, sound not working, the speaker's not arriving.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be challenges. And I always say, whenever there's a run sheet, I've never really seen a run sheet execute exactly as it is. It's more of just a guiding tool. And so, oh, wow, so many examples of, the speaker not coming, countless examples of mics running out of battery.
Oof.
But it's not, what you shouldn't do is just dwell on the thing that's not working, because that's just awkward and you're going to draw attention to it. You'd be so surprised that if you just roll on with it, maybe pretend that didn't happen, or just acknowledge it, have a laugh, then no one really cares.
No.
Like the amount of Zoom calls that happen or webinars that happen, sometimes I run webinars and something's not working. I ran something recently, a webinar, and these are just really minor examples. If something fails in an event, it's not a huge issue at all, really.
No.
But there was one webinar I was running, and one of the three speakers just was kind of just like MIA for the day. And so that's fine. We had two other speakers. They were both male, and as the person coordinating it all, there's a lot of important things. Diversity is always an important thing. So the first thing on my mind is, it's not going to look good if we just have two, men on this thing. But that's right. If someone's not here, that's right. Just continue on with it. Just act normal, everyone. Act normal. And then we had the speaker arrive, texting, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, don't stress about it." And then joins the call, and I'm thinking, let's just act natural and pretend we're just introducing the speaker now. A little bit late, but no one will notice. And she starts with, "I'm so sorry, everyone." And I'm like, don't say that. Just act natural, because you're going to draw more attention to it. So people don't really care.
No.
But if you care,
And you dwell on it.
yeah, and we all care, but if you draw more attention, it becomes a negative
Yeah.
snowball. And there's always, things that don't work out in running events, but the improvisation is really important.
Yeah.
And in tourism, if I were to go back to tour guiding, anything can happen, really. Like you'd have people on the street yelling at you.
Oof.
There was a guy I worked with who got punched in the face.
Stop.
Yeah, I had female tour guides who'd got.
Melbourne?
Yeah, in Melbourne. Yeah, yeah. Oh, and you do it enough, you're bound to run into something like that. Like I had a female tour guide who got like literally picked up and carried by someone, and no harm was done, but that was really distressing for her.
Of course.
And there's a group of 30 people going, what do we do? Is that your friend? What do we do? Just being able to, I think, improvise and being
bounce back
in
from
that
that,
environment
yeah.
and trying to just continue on or carry on with it. People often do respect someone who can be so in the moment and can carry on regardless of the challenges in there. But whether it's podcasting, whether it's an event, as you know, anything can happen, but that's all just part of it. And
It's part of life.
yeah, part of life. Yeah. Yeah. Besides that example of, the assaults happening,
Yeah.
it's all part of the, besides those extreme examples, it's all part of the joy of, running things in person.
Yes.
Yeah. Like nothing's ever going to go 100% smoothly.
Yeah.
But
It sounds
yeah.
like you're an expert in pivoting now with all your experience.
I wouldn't say an expert, but yeah, I don't mind getting a curveball every now and then. And
Of course.
yeah, just reassuring everyone, no, it's fine. We'll just work around
It's
it.
just part
Yeah.
of life. So I'm really keen to get your perspective, having sort of, I don't want to say been around for a while, you are still young, but how have you seen cultural attitudes towards failure change across the Australian startup ecosystem? Because I think I'm very passionate about fostering that more. I think we still have some work to do in encouraging more young people to consider entrepreneurship. There's a big focus on taking the traditional paths, which are really great. But I think, the focus on failure as well is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think in Australia, I still don't really think there's a culture around embracing the failure. I think in certain other cultures, they're a lot more open to it and seeing it as a positive. It often gets thrown around the use of the word tall poppy syndrome in Australia around like, don't go out of your lane. Yeah, don't do anything like that, or stay to your traditional path. In the innovation space, there's a lot more acceptance around failure and trying new things. But, just as second nature, your body has evolved to survive throughout evolution. And so, I'm sure we all have examples of, maybe you had hesitations in starting a podcast. Oh, don't want to go out and do that.
Still do to this day.
Yeah,
but here we are.
I always have things, shouldn't try that, shouldn't do this, but I always try to remind myself that. So I think there is a lot of shift around accepting the failure and embracing the failure. There's still a lot of work to be done, but I know in other cultures as well, it's a lot harder. I do have some friends that are working on startups and products around creating some cultural norms around embracing failures for certain diverse groups, maybe East Asian communities or South Asian communities, around maybe removing the stigma around whether it's mental health or whether it's around entrepreneurship. So there is a lot of change, but I think the world would be a lot better if we all, ourselves included, just maybe embraced it a little bit more and reassured ourselves that if something fails, that's not the end. That's just a call to action to try something different.
And really just a part of the story. I often say when people go to seek funding from VCs, as an example, they often ask for your track record. And if you're a second or third time founder, it's usually seen as a positive. They rarely say, oh, no, you've failed before. Like, why would we give you money? Often it's shown that you have resilience, you've learned, you've had a go, this isn't your first crack. And it's actually quite a positive thing. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. They get very shy. And it almost seems like it puts them off trying again. I really, really like how you put that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of investors will not be persuaded by a pitch where a founder doesn't have any failures. Because they know that failures will come. It might be 3 failures, it might be 10.
Of course.
And I remember having a uni professor who said something really interesting. He said, God, everyone fail fast and fail quick and fail on a small scale. He said, fail on 5 or 10 grand. Don't fail. Try not to fail on 100, 200 grand. And I think knowing that there's going to be a number of failures before any kind of milestone gets hit, especially if it's capital raising. Yeah. It's a huge thing to navigate. But investors do see that as an asset.
They do. Yeah. And they expect you to fail, and they don't expect a perfect journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if they're investing on someone who hasn't had many examples of a big failure, they're going to be thinking, well, many failures are going to come, and if we're going to invest, then that failure is probably going to be on this investment. Is there anyone who's had a few failures, a few runs on the board who
For sure.
might be ready.
Few runs on the board. To have another go. In hindsight, is there any personal or career-based failure that you're actually really grateful for?
Yeah. When I think about that, I often think about career journeys and career not ending up on the expectation I had of myself. And so I think when I was a bit younger, always wanted just a stable job, a highly senior role somewhere, as everyone wants. I personally, I wouldn't say I've ever really found a huge amount of success in I suppose, holding down a job or the type of job I wanted. And so there was a period, especially working in startups, where a lot of the jobs, as in full-time employment, that I had only lasted maybe 6 months or 9 months. At the time, I saw that as a huge failure. I saw that example I gave where I decided to do part-time and then go back into 1 day of tour guiding a week. I saw that as a huge backward step.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was really, really self-conscious about it. Yeah. However, I've even had some chats recently about potential new clients for next year and new projects and the option of like, oh, what if we hired you part-time or full-time? And I just thought working independently and the failures that put me in a situation where I work fractional or freelance has put me in a position where I enjoy work so much more being independent rather than internal. It adds so much accountability if you are working externally as a contractor or a freelancer or et cetera, because they can let go of you at any time. In employment, you can kind of get stuck in a hierarchy somewhere, and if you want the flexibility to be able to do whatever you want, a conference comes up you want to go to, or like this project comes up that you want to work on, you can't really say yes to those opportunities when you are full-time. But also, I've noticed like the level of respect from the client or would-be employer has gone up a lot more because you're external. Yeah, but it allow. Like, I'm in the mindset of I need to really go above and beyond. So I actually work so much harder now for clients that I do work independently. I know if I was internal there, oh no, the mindset shifts a little bit because you just think,
yeah,
and you don't pick up all the internal baggage. I've noticed, like that's not in my head at all.
And I guess it's more on you and your reputation. If it doesn't go well, they're not satisfied. It's your job. Then you won't get referred or repeat clients.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about like the example of investors, they might invest in 50 founders or 50 startups, let's just say for an example, and they're expecting the vast majority of them will fail, but statistically, it's possible that one of those 50 investments might give so much of a return that it makes up for all those losses, as opposed to just putting all their money in one company. The diversification principle.
Super important.
Yeah, it's really important. And so the word portfolio career is mentioned a lot. Are you familiar with that too? Yeah. So a portfolio career allows you to diversify all the different clients you're working with, all the different projects you're working on. So if one falls through the cracks or a business goes under, then you're not hugely exposed to that risk. Similar to the investor who, all the startups they've invested in may not create a return. But I think it really comes down to that, the insecurity around not really being able to hold down a job. And for a number of reasons, sometimes I wanted to leave or do other things. But that was something I was really, really self-conscious on. But that created what I thought was a failure at the time. But in hindsight, that was the best thing that ever happened. Yeah, because it allowed me just to do other things and, go closer towards the Ikigai that we always talk about.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see all the things you're doing. Your LinkedIn is like every day a new thing. It's so exciting. I wish I was living in Melbourne, tagging along to all the amazing events.
Oh, thank you.
It's really cool.
I try not to make it about me, though. I try to make it about like other things, other projects. Yeah. Oh, no, thanks for that.
Well, this has been a very, very insightful conversation. It's been really nice chatting to you and learning more about community and your work in that space. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
This is Fayl Tales, real stories and real lessons. If you enjoyed this episode, share with a friend and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch the full episode on YouTube and make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok and LinkedIn to see more clips and get behind the scenes content. Bye.